This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 159 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast, and today's topic is languages and travel. Now, I haven't really done the right preparation for this episode. I've just come back from Queensland, where, like here in Western Australia, they speak English, so I haven't been practicing any foreign languages particularly. That's not entirely true when I think about it. When I was wandering through Cairns in northern Queensland, in the first couple of days I was there, I didn't have too many people I knew there yet. They were all off on other trips. And I did discover that there is a huge number of Japanese tourists also wandering around northern Queensland and especially Cairns, I think. And I went to the night markets in Cairns, and even the stall holders were mostly Japanese and speaking Japanese. So just for that moment, I did feel like I was somewhere else and I could understand pretty much everything they were saying, and that made me feel warm and fuzzy. So there you go. I forgot about that until I just started talking. I did have a bit of a foreign language experience recently. But what I was going to say was that perhaps Queensland versus Western Australia and some other places, but that's one of the few times when I can sort of vaguely maybe hear a little bit of a different accent. It's weird in Australia. It's not like in Germany, from one part to the other, it can sound like a completely different language, not even just a dialect sometimes. But here in Australia, we're pretty even. So anyway, preparing this episode about languages has made me realise how much I miss speaking other languages more, and I'm going to do something about it. Don't know what yet, but I will. I've got to get back to making sure my German remains fluent. It's hard when you live on the other side of the world. I've got to do something and be a bit more proactive about it, I suspect. I know in the past I have subscribed to a few German podcasts, but then I've never felt in the right mood to listen. Perhaps it takes a bit more effort, but perhaps I need to be. Anyway, enough of my language-related rambling. In today's episode, I'm chatting with three people who have some fun and interesting stories to tell and some thoughts to ponder on about languages and travel. Now, my first guest is Denise, and we chatted to Denise a few episodes ago, not too long ago, in the episode about dance, where we talked about her time in Spain doing the flamenco. And she reflected on that flamenco time and told me about some of the little unexpected learnings about language that she had during her time in Spain.
So I was kind of thinking a lot about this flamenco trip. So I was trying to think about speaking Spanish, because I would say I'm beginner to intermediate range, not super good, but I can get by. And it was just for the most part, it went well, I would say, because especially I'm a Chinese Canadian. And so I think when I travel in Europe, they don't expect you to speak Spanish or something,
Oh, that's kind of a lucky bonus. So then they're more pleased when you do than average.
In some places, if you look Asian, they don't even expect you to speak English, right? So everyone's saying I speak so well, and they, which is not true. I'm trying to think if there was any kind of funny moments. I think just talking to locals, it was interesting to talk about pop culture, and there was someone who was saying he really likes the singer Jorge Miguel. Jorge Miguel. I'm like, who's that? And I realized it was George Michael. They call it Jorge Miguel. And then we were also thinking about the way that movies are translated, movie titles translated from English to Spanish. And sometimes it's quite a literal translation, and then sometimes it's, kind of surprising. So that summer that I was in Granada, one of the Fast and the Furious movies was coming out, but the Spanish title was Todo el Gas, all the gas.
Oh, no. It doesn't have the same ring to it at all.
Yeah, not like rápido y furioso or something. So it's so those little differences were kind of funny. One of the students there was Argentinian, and in Argentina, when they watch Hollywood movies, they use subtitles, like they don't dub the movies.
Yeah.
But in Spain, sometimes it's dubbed. So they had just gone to see. I think it was Mission Impossible, one of those sequels, but it was dubbed. So then they were like, oh my gosh, Tom Cruise speaks such good Spanish. Oh. And we're like, no, that wasn't him.
Oh, bless.
Just when I was looking back at my travel journal, these were some of the little moments that stuck out to me. And then, I don't know, I was there and I was dancing every day, and you're journaling and reflecting, and then just some random observations would stick out to me. So, for instance, one of them was the Spanish verb esperar. It means to wait, but it also means to hope.
Oh.
And somehow I didn't notice that until I was there. So, I was thinking, there's so many times I'm in Spain and I'm trying to get the bill. I've eaten all my food and no, you can't get anyone's attention. And I was like, you're waiting and you really are hoping. You're hoping they're going to bring you that bill. So you can, oh, that's so interesting. Those things, those nuances of a language that you can't really capture when you translate it. So anyway, those are some,
I love that.
some little nuggets.
I live for those little nuggets. I just love those, those little tidbits that you don't, they're never even in a textbook really, but when you're living somewhere or immersed somewhere, you start to pick up all these little, or to speak to people, you start to pick up all these little differences. I used to teach English as a second language all around the world, but especially when I taught here in Perth, I would have a room full of students who would be, maybe 10 or 12 different nationalities. And we had those kind of little quirks that we would learn regularly from their languages. And I loved it. It's so interesting. Some of those either lost in translation moments or the times when you realise with great joy that words just have kind of different meanings and nuances. That's what I love about travelling and talking about languages with speakers of other languages. So it's so much fun to be had. Now, my next guest today is Kendall Simmons, and we chatted about, when we should learn other languages, why we should, and about our, really incredible privilege of being English, the native speakers. Although, is it a privilege or is it a curse? I'm not sure, because it means we are less likely to learn other languages well. But anyway, I'll let you have a listen to what Kendall and I had to say about this topic.
I speak enough French to be able to get by, to be able to order in a restaurant, to be able to get through an emergency, to be able to walk into a store and say, où est le papier de toilette, s'il vous plaît? It's an emergency. So I have enough French to get by. And I would say that I have enough words in Spanish to be able to, in an emergency, make sure someone understands what I am trying to express to them. That's about it as far as fluency. My brain, I'm a very, very visual person. And unfortunately, languages are really tough for me. They're one of those sticking points. I like to joke that, I was a straight A student. I did very well all through school and university. The only classes of my entire life that I ever did poorly in were all language classes, which is a shame because I'm such a traveler. It's actually kind of ridiculous. It's kind of a cruel joke, the way my brain works. That being said, here's the rule of thumb, which I think everyone should follow. Learn the critical phrases that you need no matter what country you go to. It doesn't take that long to learn the pleases, the thank yous, my name is, and the staple of being able to walk into a place and say to someone in an emergency, do you speak English, in their language is it's such a small thing that takes a few moments to learn how to say, but it is courteous in such a way that it's important, right? It's important to show that, yes, I am here for only a short amount of time, but I value you and I value your country and your culture. And I have at least taken the time to learn how to say these few phrases to express to you, can you please help me? Even though I'm not going to be able to fully communicate in your language, I do want to show you that I care about you enough to have made a serious effort.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And here's the funny thing. Those of us who grow up in English-speaking countries are blessed beyond measure without even knowing it in a lot of ways. But the fact that the vast majority of the world learns English as their second language, because that's often what language is used in university settings in other countries and other reasons. That's what business is conducted in a lot of times. We are so, so lucky that is the case, because when you go to almost any other country and you make a very strong effort to do the complimentary getting to know you niceties in their local language, you know what's going to happen 9 times out of 10 these days is they're going to say, oh, thank you so much. I actually have a little bit of English. Let's talk about this to see what we need to do. And so that actually is such a gift to those of us who are, like I said, from English-speaking countries, because it just makes our life a little bit easier without you don't have to be fluent.
Yeah.
It's so important, in my opinion, to be kind and to express enough to be very courteous. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, in an ideal world, it would be great if we could speak, a conversational amount of every language, but there's too many languages in too many countries. And I think especially as growing up as a native English speaker, I don't think it's that different between the States or here or the UK, because we know English is fairly international language. It's not considered too important to become good at other languages, compared to like in European countries where a lot of them will speak 3 or 4 languages because they've learnt them all through school. So, it's sad but true, and I don't think we can change the world. But at least if you learn some basic phrases, I think you're right. As a courtesy, that's so important.
It is. And I think that goes a long way just with goodwill between, human beings, just to say, hey, I recognize that I'm not able to speak to you in your language, but please don't think that that's because I'm a rude American or a rude Australian.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
It's just the way the world works. And, also 9 times out of 10, it's so important. It sounds really simple to say, but it's so important to have a smile and to have kindness in your approach to anyone. Sometimes people can become very, very stressed out in a travel situation where they can't speak the language and they become frustrated. And I think that stress can easily be projected onto another person. And it's not meant, it's not intentional, but I see this with tourists a lot, where I just think, oh, you don't realize how that's coming off to this person.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that besides just the actual literal language and speaking the words, the universal body language of a smile and of a humble approach of like, I'm expressing to you that I need help and that maybe I'm not fluent, but I would really love to make an attempt to communicate with you. That universal language of how you're behaving and your tone and your body language and your smile goes almost as far as learning the actual language itself, if that makes any sense.
My final guest today is Dan Johnston. It's a while ago since we spoke with Dan originally, but you might remember him as someone who's living in the Czech Republic at the moment. It has been for a few years. So we talk about language learning and learning tricky languages like Czech, and about why you can kind of feel like you've got a bit of a different personality, or you feel just kind of out of sorts when, for an extended length of time, you can't speak the local language well?
Spanish, I can now get by.
Okay.
In sort of, I can speak enough Spanish that if someone speaks no Spanish, they will assume I speak it well when I'm talking to a waiter or something.
Got it. Okay.
At that level,
that's a good way to describe it. Yeah, exactly. Surely you don't speak too much Czech. Czech is a horrifyingly difficult language to learn, right?
It is. It's. I've been putting in some time with it, so my recognition and that is definitely better than it was. There's probably a few hundred words I know at least now, but far from, like, last Christmas at my girlfriend's family, my crowning achievement was to be able to say, "Your tree is nice. It is little, but it is nice."
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. And so I was very proud. That was like, I'm done learning for the year. That was, but it is something that over time, among my friends, there's different levels. I'm probably the lowest level for someone who's lived here 4 years now, but different people putting in different levels of effort. So you can get conversational with it. But it is, I've been traveling a couple months each year too, which a few times I found reset it. I'd come back and I'd forget what I learned. And then I just gave up for a while, truthfully, but I'm kind of getting back to it now.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard. I think I did learn when I was teaching English in Bratislava, they gave us free Slovak lessons. And I think if we had started off with a group of, 15, 16 teachers learning, and by the end of the semester, I think there were 3 of us who had stuck out the semester, and I did not go back the next semester. I think 1 or 2 did, but and obviously Slovak and Czech are pretty similar, but Czech's harder even because you got these extra sounds that I think are impossible to make, but the grammar's hard, and it's just, they don't have enough vowels anywhere, and so
it's one of the few languages where, after living in Germany, and I learned a little bit of German while I was there, and then starting to learn Czech, I was like, I would wish for German now.
Absolutely.
German is not a language anyone wants to learn, really. I think I have my own thoughts. I think Mark Twain wrote the whole essay on why German is a terrible language. But it is a difficult one. I do want to learn it. And the reason is, I do think long term, to connect more with people, that even if you can get by in English, I have found I've become more introverted. When I left Vancouver, I was that guy who would, in the elevator, would be like, "How's your day today?" Kind of the annoying, very friendly guy. Yeah. And that's partially a cultural difference too, between I think Canadians and Australians versus Europeans, is we do more small talk and chit chat. But I've definitely found, I feel like I've lost part of my strength or resources, which was talking to people and bridging connections. And there's, it's something I miss. And you do feel a bit of a disconnection over time, where you are getting by, you can get anything you want, you can communicate if you need with your phone, but it's not probably the same feeling of belonging with even speaking small amounts where you can kind of get the jokes people are making in the language at the bar or whatever it is. I think I would be happy at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you don't need it for your work, you don't need to be fluent, but to be able to just chat. I mean, so I lived in Germany for a few years, but I'd also learnt German back in school here in Australia, which is why I ended up moving to Germany. And so I was relatively fluent by the time I left, but, fluent in the sense that back here in Australia, when my son was born, I joined a play group for German parents. And some of them wouldn't realize that I wasn't German, when we chatted initially. Yeah, which to me was like, oh, wow, okay, basically just because I mumble a lot with the tricky grammar bits. So, I found a way to get around these because I could, der, die, das, den, dem. It's all too hard to remember which one's which. Yeah. So I just mumble quickly there. Exactly. It's crazy. But that ability to be able to just join in with a conversation and have a general chat. There's no way I could work in a German office or anything. My written German is horrifying. But that kind of ability, that level of being able to chat, I think you really do feel more connected to a community when you've got to that level. So
definitely,
yeah.
I'm curious if you ever found this, because you've lived in a bunch of places as well, is when I'm traveling and I'm first somewhere, like when I first came, say, to Prague, I had no insecurity about the language. You just like speak English. My uncle was here a few years ago. Now he's an over the top friendly guy. He's a Kiwi. And he like would go to Czech bars on his own and he made Czech friends. He's like, yeah, I'm hanging out with like Pavlov tomorrow, whatever his name was. And he's just like making all these friends with no insecurity about it. And I remember I was that way more when I first got here. And then at least I should say, I'm not you, but I developed an insecurity because I'm like 4 years and I don't speak the language well. But no one knows that at the grocery. Well, the grocery store might recognize me, but most places
but
don't
in
know
general,
that.
yeah.
So it's sort of in your own head of this feeling like I should speak the language. But if I was if I'm in Latvia as a tourist, I have no insecurity about speaking English because there's no expectation I should speak Latvian. It's yeah. Did you ever find that?
I felt exactly that. So, especially, I lived in Japan for a couple of years and I learnt Japanese and I got better and better, but it was, it's very different to anything I'd learnt before. And, Japanese people are often, especially where I was living in a little bit countryside area, and they were certainly not brave enough to speak English to me if they knew any. So I would try and get by in Japanese and I think, I've been here 2 years. I should be better at this. And I felt, I did feel quite self-conscious about my inability to have a, really proper conversation. Yeah. I could do the transactional daily things, but not a real conversation. And, not only that, I also felt, I tried pretty hard. It's just, I was speaking English all day at work because I was an English teacher. Yeah. So, there's a limit to how well you can go, I suppose. But I felt that I should have done better. And I felt frustrated that I wasn't able to be better after that time, I think. Because, you want to be able to have a chat with lots of different kinds of people and you can't do that. And I'm probably similar to you. Like here in Australia, I'll chat to all kinds of people. I'm happy to get to know strangers and I'll talk to anyone. And in a situation like that where you don't have enough language, then you can't. And that's, it's frustrating. So
it was interesting to chat with Dan about that self-conscious feeling you get. I remember living in Japan in the early days. Well, in fact, even towards the end, I didn't speak, particularly fluent Japanese by any means, but I could get by a bit better, but especially perhaps in the middle days when I could understand quite a lot, but not everything. And I'd be out with a group of Japanese speaking friends and I would spend quite a lot of time just kind of nodding and laughing along, kind of understanding, thinking I was probably understanding most of things, but not having enough language to be able to speak back. And it is a weird thing. It kind of alters your personality amongst those people. I guess a lot of my Japanese friends would have thought perhaps I was quite quiet. And if you're not a Japanese friend of mine, you'll know I'm anything but most of the time. And I like to have a really good natter. But it's interesting how this, the effect that speaking or not speaking other languages can have on you. Anyway, that is it for our language chats today. Thank you very much for listening to episode 159 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. I'm grateful to my wonderful guests, and they are Denise Tam from Spas of the World. You can find her at spartravels.home.blog, Kendall from kendallsimmons.com, and Dan from dreamsaroundtheworld.com. And if you want to see any more info about this episode, you can find it at the show notes. And the show notes for this one are notaballerina.com/159. Don't forget to come and join our Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers, and perhaps we can share some of our language disasters there. Next week, I've got a special episode coming up because, as regular listeners will know, every 10th episode, it's something a bit different. And I'm not going to tell you what it is because it could be one of two things, both of which I think are quite awesome. But it all depends on a bit of timing as to which of those two things it is. So you'll just have to wait and see. Thank you very much for listening.
This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.